The golden hues of the setting sun cast long shadows over the streets of Austin as Marcus Hayes navigated the familiar route home. His sedan hummed steadily, the soft murmur of the radio filling the quiet space around him. It had been a long day at the office, and he was eager to unwind. As he approached an intersection, the traffic light flickered from yellow to red. He eased to a stop, exhaling slowly. That's when the red and blue lights erupted behind him, a police siren slicing through the air. Marcus's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, his brow furrowing slightly. Keeping his composure, he pulled over to the side of the road, rolling down his window as the police cruiser came to a halt behind him. From the vehicle emerged Officer Danielle Carter, mid-30s, her dark hair pulled back into a tight bun, her badge gleaming under the dimming sunlight. Her walk carried the confidence of authority, her gaze scanning the car with practiced scrutiny. "License and registration," she said, her tone clipped, the words carrying the weight of unchallenged control. Marcus nodded, retrieving his documents with slow, deliberate movements before handing them over. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Carter asked, leaning in slightly. Marcus met her gaze evenly. "Not entirely sure, officer." "You didn't come to a full stop at the light," she said, though there was a flicker of hesitation in her voice. Marcus caught it. "I see," Marcus replied, his tone measured and composed. "I believed I slowed in time, but I understand." Carter didn't respond immediately. Instead, she lingered, her eyes narrowing. The interaction had shifted. This was no longer about a minor traffic violation. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, her voice carrying an edge now, something more than routine procedure. Marcus hesitated a fraction of a second too long. "I moved here a few months ago. My address is on my license." Carter wasn't listening. Her questions carried a sharper edge now, her posture shifting as her instincts scanned for something, anything to justify a deeper probe. "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home," Marcus said, his voice remaining steady, but the air had changed. He could feel it. Carter didn't just see a driver anymore. She saw something else, something that warranted suspicion. Carter took a step back, folding Marcus's documents with exaggerated slowness before tucking them into her chest pocket. "Step out of the car for me." Marcus's grip on the steering wheel tightened briefly, but his face remained unreadable. "Is there a specific reason for that, officer?" Carter smirked, though the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. "I asked you to step out of the car. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Marcus exhaled slowly and opened the door, stepping out with measured control. He was taller than Carter, his suit crisp, his demeanor calm, yet none of it seemed to matter. "Hands where I can see them," she ordered. Marcus complied. "Is there something specific you're looking for?" Carter's smirk returned. "Just routine. We've had some incidents around here. You can never be too careful." Marcus turned his head slightly, locking eyes with her. "Incidents involving men in business suits driving sedans? Or does this have more to do with something else?" The question landed like a punch. Carter's composure faltered. "Watch your tone," she warned, her hand drifting toward her belt, a reflex more than a necessity. Marcus didn't flinch. "I just believe in being clear about the reasons for an interaction like this. Transparency, you know?" Carter scoffed but said nothing. She paced in a small circle, recalibrating. Something was off. Marcus wasn't reacting like most people would. No fear, no stammering, just controlled, unshaken confidence. "You seem pretty confident," Carter muttered. "Like you think you know what's going to happen next." Marcus tilted his head. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is." Carter froze. The words had cut deeper than expected. She opened her mouth, but the response never came. The balance of power was shifting. "Turn around and place your hands on the hood," she ordered. Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Weapons?" he asked incredulously. "Do I look like someone carrying a weapon?" Carter's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to ask you again." Marcus hesitated, then complied. Carter patted him down, her touch lingering a second too long, a provocation. But Marcus remained still, unmoved. "You're clean," Carter muttered, almost irritated by the fact. Marcus turned to face her, his voice sharp. "Of course I am. Now if you're done." "I'm not done," Carter interrupted, her tone rising. "You seem to know a lot about what I can and can't do. Care to explain why?" Marcus folded his arms. I've had my fair share of interactions with law enforcement. Let's just say I've learned a lot over the years. Carter's eyes narrowed. So, you a lawyer or something? Marcus smiled faintly. Or something. The ambiguity irked Carter. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. You think you're smarter than me? Think you can talk your way out of this? Marcus met her gaze evenly. I don't think anything, officer. I just believe in fairness. And so far, I'm not seeing much of it here. Carter stiffened, her mask slipping. People like you always? She stopped abruptly, the words hovering, unspoken but heavy. Marcus didn't change his expression, but his posture shifted slightly. People like me? Carter took a small step back, as if realizing she had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Marcus exhaled, reaching into his pocket. I'm reaching for my badge, he said, watching Carter's hand twitch near her holster. No need for theatrics, I want you to see it. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a gleaming badge. Marcus Hayes, he said, his tone casual. Head of Internal Affairs, Austin Division. Carter froze, her face paling as her eyes darted between the badge and Marcus's unwavering expression. The authority she had wielded moments ago suddenly felt weightless. Marcus stepped forward. Do you know the most troubling part of this interaction, Officer Carter? Carter said nothing. She looked like a woman who had just realized she was standing in quicksand. It's not the profiling, Marcus continued. It's that you did all of this without even realizing who you were talking to, because I didn't fit your idea of someone deserving respect. Carter's shoulders sagged. She reached into her pocket, fumbling slightly as she handed Marcus's documents back. Marcus took them, stepping toward his car. Before getting in, he glanced over his shoulder. Remember this, Officer Carter, he said. The badge doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you accountable to everyone. As he drove away, Carter stood frozen in place. But for Marcus, this was far from over. Change was coming, and it would start at the top. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his office early, the events of the previous evening still fresh in his mind. He sat at his desk, staring at the stack of files in front of him, each one representing a case that needed his attention. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the encounter with Carter. It wasn't the first time he'd seen behavior like that, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But it was the first time he'd been on the receiving end of it since taking on his current role. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. This is Marcus Hayes. I need a meeting with the chief as soon as possible. Within the hour, Marcus was seated across from Chief Linda Martinez, a seasoned officer with a reputation for being tough but fair. She listened intently as Marcus recounted the previous night's events, her expression growing more serious with each passing moment. This is unacceptable, Martinez said finally, leaning back in her chair. But you know as well as I do that this isn't an isolated incident. Marcus nodded. I know. That's why I'm bringing it to you. We need to address this, not just for the sake of the community, but for the integrity of the department. Martinez sighed, running a hand through her graying hair. You're right, but change doesn't happen overnight, and it's not going to be easy. I'm not expecting it to be easy, Marcus replied. But it's necessary. We can't keep turning a blind eye to this kind of behavior. It's eroding trust and it's putting people at risk. Martinez studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, I'll back you on this, but you're going to have to take the lead. You're the one with the credibility here. Marcus knew she was right. As head of Internal Affairs, it was his job to root out corruption and misconduct within the department. But this was bigger than just one officer. This was about systemic change. Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly, reviewing case files, interviewing officers, and meeting with community leaders. He knew that to make real change, he needed to understand the root of the problem. And the more he dug, the more he realized just how deep it went. It wasn't just about individual officers like Carter. It was about a culture that had been allowed to fester for years. A culture of us versus them, where the badge was seen as a shield rather than a responsibility. Marcus knew that changing that culture would be an uphill battle, but he was determined to see it through. One afternoon, as he was reviewing a particularly troubling case file, there was a knock at his door. He looked up to see Carter standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Marcus nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "What can I do for you, Officer Carter?" Carter sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened that night," she said finally, "and I wanted to apologize. I was out of line, and I know that now." Marcus studied her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair. "Apologies are a start," he said, "but they're not enough, not when it comes to something like this." Carter nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know, and I want to do better. I don't know how." Marcus sighed, his expression softening slightly. "It's not easy," he admitted, "but it starts with recognizing the problem, and it sounds like you're doing that." Carter looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I am, and I want to help, whatever it takes." Marcus considered her words for a moment, then nodded. "All right, then let's get to work." Over the next few months, Marcus and Carter worked together, along with a small team of officers who were committed to making a change. They implemented new training programs, focused on de-escalation and community engagement. They held town hall meetings, listening to the concerns of the people they served. And slowly but surely, things began to change. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and challenges along the way. But Marcus knew that real change was never easy. And as he looked out over the city he had come to call home, he felt a sense of hope. A hope that one day, the streets of Austin would be a place where everyone, regardless of who they were or where they came from, could feel safe and respected. And as for Carter, she had become one of the most vocal advocates for change within the department. She had taken Marcus's words to heart and had dedicated herself to being the kind of officer she had always wanted to be, one who served with integrity and respect. As the sun set over Austin, casting its golden hues over the city, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The road ahead was still long, but they were on the right path. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like they were making a difference.